no political jokes tonight, so that the things that we would normally be saying at this kind of a gathering, such as, is there such a thing as a good politician? What an oxymoron. Or, you know, the typical type of stuff, what's the difference between a dead politician in the middle of the road and a skunk? You all know that. There's skid marks leading up to the skunk. We're going to avoid those kinds of temptations and try to be more serious about the appreciation and the fine things that everybody has to say about Bill. I wanted to start very briefly with a proclamation from one of our neighboring cities that reads as follows. Bill Nee has been politically active for over 30 years. Bill Nee did not seek re-election and will be leaving his post of 21 consecutive years as the mayor of Fridley. Bill Nee has displayed dedication and hard work in all his political endeavors, and Bill Nee will be missed by his constituents, friends, and associates in the political arena. I, Robert J. Benke, Mayor of the City of New Brighton, on behalf of the City Council, and in recognition, appreciation, and thanks, do hereby offer this proclamation to William Nee. A Senate resolution. Again, whereas Bill Nee has served the citizens of Fridley for the past 40 years, and after serving 29 years in public office, 4 as a councilman and 25 as a mayor, he is retiring at the end of the year. Whereas on the state and national levels, he's been involved in concerns pertaining to electric and gas utility rates, regional sanitary sewer service, postal service, hospitals, water sports, tourism, and protection of the environment, especially the Mississippi River. And he has encouraged others to seek public office and has assisted them in their election campaigns. Whereas Bill Nee leaves public office with a reputation for visionary leadership, concern for the disadvantaged, openness to all sides of a question, the courage of his convictions, good humor, modesty, and fairness. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Senate of the State of Minnesota that it commends Bill Nee for his service and commitment to the Fridley community. Hey. All very justly deserving awards, Bill, and we really congratulate you on that. We also got somebody that wanted to make a brief presentation to you, and I'm going to ask her to come up very quickly and make her presentation to you, Belva Rasmussen.
Mayor, many years ago, I have kind of a cute story to tell you about Bill. Many years ago, he came over on his bicycle while my late husband, Walter Rasmussen, we were sitting on the porch by the river. We live on Alden Way here. And he came to ask Walter to please serve on the HRA board, which he did for just about 9 years before he got ill. So this is our long acquaintance with you, Bill, and it's been a very good acquaintance. You have made our community of Fridley a better place in which to live. And on behalf of the Northeast Bank, I would like to present to you this plaque. And it's going to be, unfortunately, our vendor did not put your personalized name on it, but it will be done for you. We had a disappointment on Saturday when he did not put the individualized plaque on it for you. But we want to thank you very much for your leadership, not only in Fridley, but throughout, being an example of what a mayor can do for their city. That's Bill Nee. Thank you.
Well, that reminds me, one time I saw Bill on his bike also. If we call it his bike, I mean, I remember there's a picture in the back of the room there of Bill on his bike. He used to patrol the streets of Fridley dressed up in his black motorcycle jacket and riding his bike around the town. And you know, he'd come down the street and waving at everybody. I remember being over visiting with one of my friends, and here comes Bill on a weekend driving his bike down the street and looking over, watching out for everybody, and you know, waving to the people and everything. The only problem was he'd forgotten he made it into a one-way street and he's going the wrong way. So anyway, we had a good time with him, but if any of you that have been around here for long years do remember really how Bill was and how active he was in doing that. At this time, I've got a letter I'd like to read to everybody too. I am pleased to have this opportunity to send you my hearty congratulations and best wishes as you retire after 21 distinguished years as the mayor of Fridley. Yours is an outstanding record of active, vital participation in all aspects of city government and municipal life in Fridley for almost the entire period that has been a city. More than anyone else, you have been instrumental in Fridley's development from a rural area into the thriving city it is today. My friend, you can take great pride in the reputation you've earned throughout these years. You have made outstanding and far-reaching contributions to your community, your state, and your country. And in the process, you have exemplified what is best in public service. Best regards, Hubert H. Humphrey III, Attorney General of the State of Minnesota. At this time, we're going to turn to some of our speakers who I am authorized to use if those people in my generation remember the hook. And we're going to try to keep it very short and brief, but hopefully to the point. And I'm going to try to exercise that right with some discretion. The program that we have is some of the speakers that have worked many years with Bill throughout the city government here in Fridley. And the first person that we'd like to call upon is Virginia Schnabel, who has been the former chair of the Planning Commission and is currently vice chair of the Housing and Redevelopment Authority.
In the 1960s, Fridley was taking shape as a growing community. Warren Thompson, Bernie Benson, and many other builders were buying up large areas and were developing affordable housing for the citizens. While on opposite corners, Rodney Billman's Innsbrook and Pearson's Craigway estates were taking shape. There was a center of the city that was forming on the corner of Mississippi and University. There was a city hall, a fire barn, drugstore, paint and wallpaper store, a few strip malls, a few other businesses, car wash, laundry, so forth. And in 1961, Bill Nee was elected to the City Council in Fridley. 2 years later, in 1963, he ran for mayor and he was elected. He was popular with members of the DFL party, and he had a vision for the future development of Fridley. But in March of 1965, the mighty Mississippi overflowed its banks and caused severe damage to Fridley homes in the Riverview Flats area. After assessing the damage, Mayor Nee went to the City Council and developed a plan to assist those people. And then suddenly, in the dark of night, on May 6, 1965, the forces of nature changed everything in Fridley when massive tornadoes roared out of the sky and demolished great areas in our city. Once again, Mayor Nee swung into action and proposed a plan to the City Council and to help those unfortunate residents who had lost so much. He leaned on DFL friends in high places to get fast action on their insurance claims. And while Fridley residents collectively held their breath, waiting for whatever else Mother Nature was going to throw at them, Bill Nee was talking about urban renewal. On May 26, 1965, a notice was published in the local newspaper announcing the incorporation of a Housing and Redevelopment Authority Board in the city of Fridley, and it was signed by Mayor Nee and council members Kirkham, Wright, Sheridan, and Thompson. Federal assistance through the Title Act of 1949 was sought, and urban renewal projects were developed. The first one was bounded by University Avenue on the west, 61st Avenue on the north, 7th Street on the east, and 694 on the south. A second area, the Riverview Heights floodplain area, was identified, and thirdly, the city center area was identified. Minutes from the June 7th, 1965 HRA meeting list as members Paul Barrow, Lois Mullen, Dick Herder, John Meyer, and Bob Kendall. And John Meyer is an active member of today's HRA board. The goal was to provide whatever assistance could be given to the residents of Fridley while upgrading city streets, sewer, and water. But Bill Nee paid a price for his determination to improve our city, and he was defeated in his bid for re-election in 1965. He took a brief hiatus, and in 1972 he was elected to the city council once again. And in 1974 he ran for mayor and won. The HRA, a concept dear to his heart, had become essentially defunct during his absence. So he sought to revive it, seeing the need for active economic and community development in attracting businesses and upgrading utilities. In January 1979, a discussion was started on the City Center project, and in May of 1979, a City Center redevelopment TIF district was formed, I believe the first in our city. Minutes from the May 1st, 1979 meeting indicate the members were Larry Commerce, Russell Hauk, Carolyn Svensson, Elmer Sperditis, and Arnold Stone. Since that time, the HRA and the City Council have met frequently to discuss and resolve issues that affect us all in the continued development of our city. But the main vision and the main driver of that development train has always been Bill Nee. In his own quiet but determined way, he has sought to keep this city viable and actively moving in a forward direction to keep up with the times and to provide jobs and housing for people on all economic levels. He has truly cared for this city. There's virtually no street, business, or neighborhood that has not received his attention. And while I believe his work is not finished, his vision will remain forever as a guide to all of us. Thank you, Mayor Nee, from the citizens of Fridley.
You can obviously see why we're so lucky to have Virginia on our Housing Redevelopment Authority. I've next got a letter that I'd like to briefly read to you. Allow me to offer my congratulations on your retirement from public office and my most sincere thanks for your 21 years of service. As we become an ever busier society, fewer and fewer people are giving of their time for their community. But you have continued to serve, Bill, whether it be as mayor, as committee member, or in any other way that you could find to help your city. I am greatly impressed. I am sure the residents of Fridley have truly appreciated all that you have done, evidenced by this wonderful event that they have planned for you. Enjoy your special day. Arnie H. Carlson, Governor of the State of Minnesota. The next speaker is a former council person who has had 2 terms, one back in the 1970s and served a second term early in the 1980s. And we're going to call upon Ed Hammernick at this time to say a few words.
Thank you. Mayor Nee, Mrs. Nee, guests. Bill, I want you to know what an honor and privilege it is for me to be able to make a few comments tonight and express some appreciation for what you've done for the city of Fridley. You've had a long and I believe a very successful political career.
In the microphone, Ed. There we go.
Thank you. Your devotion to the city of Fridley in public service is been outstanding and unparalleled. During our dealings, I felt that I've always received the greatest respect and courtesy from you, and I hope you felt the same way about me. And it's been a pleasure working with you. Thank you. I was asked if I'd make a few comments about what has happened in the 70s, but before I do that, I have a little story I'd like to relate to you. You know, today the impressions people have about politicians are quite varied, and something happened at work the other day that I thought was kind of interesting. One of our workers came to me and said, you know, I think I should have been a politician. I says, why do you feel that way? And he said, well, I needed some sand, just a little sand, and he said, I noticed at the construction site next there they had a big pile of sand, and I thought they wouldn't miss a wheelbarrow full. So one morning I brought my wheelbarrow along and was going to procure some sand. In the process, one of the construction workers came by and he said, I wasn't sure how this was going to turn out, but I engaged the individual in conversation, and before long he was using his payloader to help me get sand. So on that basis, he thought he should have been a politician. I don't want to imply that this story has any reflection on your political career, Bill, but I thought it was quite interesting. As Virginia mentioned, that Bill's political career in the 70s or involvement with the council started in 72 when he ran for ward council and was elected Ward 3 council member and served in that capacity for 73 and 74. 74, Bill was elected mayor, and he currently holds that office today. And again, it's remarkable that anyone can remain in the good graces of their constituents for 21 consecutive years. Some of the highlights and actions that took place at the city council during that period, one of them that Bill was very heavily involved in had to do with cable television. In December of 72, the then city council negotiated a cable TV franchise and authorized it by ordinance. However, immediately there were petitions circulated, and 5,000 plus residents signed these petitions, which prevented the ordinance from being implemented, and it temporarily halted cable TV installation. Bill took office in 73, and during that year a new franchise was negotiated, and it had two landmark clauses. One was making the community access channels available, and the other was a franchise fee of 5% of gross revenue. With this franchise agreement, Fridley became the first city in Minnesota, and it was among the first 10 in the country to have a cable TV system that had public access channels. In addition, the 5% of gross revenues or gross receipts was an unprecedented fee for the city. Bill was very instrumental in promoting these provisions, and in support of those and in maintaining those, he made 3 trips to Washington to present testimony before Congress, the FCC, and the Senate subcommittees regarding the local control of cable television and also the local franchise fee authority. Those trips took place in 73, 76, and 1980. And also with this agreement, Fridley has had cable telecasting of council meetings for the last 20 years. Another interesting item of Bill's career was that in 1973 he became the first male member of the Fridley League of Women Voters. It must have been a good experience because he was a member for 13 years. In 1974, included on the ballot that year was another controversial issue, and that was whether North Park should be used as a nature center or if it should be a golf course. 70% of the votes that were cast in that election were in favor of a nature center. But there were some interesting notes surrounding this issue. One of those was that the Parks and Rec Commission's recommendation on that issue was for a golf course. Within 2 years after this issue was on the ballot, all the members of the Parks and Rec Commission had changed. There was also a consultant that was hired by the city that proposed that Fridley develop a golf course in Blaine next to the airport, but that one didn't materialize either. In addition, with the vote going for the Nature Center, the naturalist program was started in 1974 with the hiring of the first naturalist. And in 1979, the Met Council awarded the city $365,000 towards the building of an interpretive center, which is currently at North Park, or now known as Springbrook. In 1975, Bill became a board member of the Anoka County Community Action Program. This group addresses issues that are directed towards the less fortunate, such as the Head Start and so forth, and he has remained a very active member of that. And he was the chairperson of that program for a number of years. As Virginia mentioned, in 1978, the HRA was reestablished, and that was the mechanism for a number of vital improvement projects for the city. Another issue that you'll hear more about later, and that Bill was very active or very supportive of, was the Sister City program with Formese France, and I see we have a guest here this evening from Formese. The groundwork for this was when Medtronic Incorporated, a company that's headquartered here in Fridley, built a facility in Formese, and Bill was, like I say, very heavily involved in starting this program and continues to be a supporter of it today. The last issue that I want to bring up is that in 1979, the city started the process of purchasing what was known then as Sears property, but is now the fine athletic complex that is located on 69th and University, which again is another very, very fine facility for the city of Fridley. These are the issues that I want to bring up, Bill, and again, I want to express my appreciation for what you've done. I want to give you my best wishes and good luck for your retirement. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Congratulations on your retirement. As your congressman, I personally want to thank you for your many years of public service to the city of Fridley and its residents. For over 30 years, your hard work and dedicated efforts have benefited this area. The many awards and honors you have received further highlight your commitment and dedication to the community. You can be proud of your distinguished public service career. Sincerely, Bill Luther, Member of Congress. Our next speaker, to reminisce a little bit about what happened in Fridley, goes back to the 1980s. And at the time that Brian Goodspeed was elected to city council, he was probably one of the youngest members of city council anywhere, just having turned 21, which is the legal required age to be able to serve. So we're going to call upon him to give you a few of his thoughts and reminiscences about his working with Bill Nee. Brian Goodspeed.
Yes, tonight is my charge to tell you about serving on the council with Bill during the 1980s. Before I begin, let me say that if my comments lead you to believe that I have long admired Bill Nee's career as mayor, that he is one of the great mentors of my adult life from whom I learned how to campaign effectively and honestly, or that I am in any way biased by personal friendship with Bill and Kay, then I have expressed myself truthfully. Bill Nee was first elected as mayor of Fridley during the same year in which I was born. I kid him about that all the time. By the time I actually met Bill, the year was 1980, and I was a senior in high school. I don't know if Bill was ever the kind of guy who walked around the room shaking everybody's hand and tooting his own horn, but the Bill I have known is a modest individual who spends far more time listening and thinking than speaking. Not to say that I've never got him going a time or two, but you can't get to know him all at once. Throughout the 1980s, I became well acquainted with Mayor William J. Nee. I spent part of this decade serving on city commissions, part of it on the city council, and all of it as a member of the Nee Volunteer Committee. The first thing I would like to tell you about Bill Nee is that it is easy to disagree with him. I recall voting differently than him on several major issues while I was on the city council. Why do I say disagreeing with Bill is so easy? Is it because his positions are generally wacky and out of touch with the mainstream? Some Republicans may think so, but that is not my opinion. Nor do I say such a thing to imply that Bill Nee never puts up a fight. By the 1980s, there were very few people around with his depth of experience and understanding of municipal issues. What I am really saying is that Bill tried to see both sides of each issue. When people would come to city council meetings to speak on an issue, they would often take nasty verbal swipes at the mayor and the city council. I never saw Bill bristle. He just seemed interested in getting the whole story. Once in the early 1980s, Bill told me he feels horror when looking back at some issue positions which he had taken in years gone by. I was captivated by this revelation. It was fully possible that in another 10 years, Bill would look back and see that history had proved him wrong again. So I figured, why shouldn't I feel free to disagree with him today? At the age of 21, history had not proven me wrong about anything. In retrospect, I suppose the real message was to keep in mind that the other person may just be right. Here is a true story which shows another side of Bill. In 1984, a brothel called the No. 1 Health Club opened up in Fridley. Bill called me on the phone and suggested we should make a trip down there to join a scheduled protest. Once there, Bill was interviewed at length by a local news show. He discussed the various facets of the situation and the inherent problems and constitutional issues involved with the criminal prosecutions and our ultimate strategy to shut the place down. Later that night at City Hall, we all watched the TV news to hear the mayor's comments. Bill appeared on the screen. He was wearing a raincoat. His audio went like this. I don't know if anybody goes to the No. 1 Health Club for exercise other than sexual. What a tawdry quote. Everyone at City Hall was laughing from way down deep. Bill was kind of laughing too. Did I really say that? I can't believe I really said that. I must have said it. Yes, Bill was the victim of a soundbite. But he took it well because Bill never took himself too seriously. No pompous politician here. Sometimes it was just plain fun serving on the city council. Finally, I would like to tell people that Bill's enthusiasm for serving as mayor of Fridley never faltered. He put his entire self into the job. Anytime Fridley needed representing, he was there, and not just for making speeches. If his presence merely demonstrated the council's concern for a topic, or if he could help by answering questions, that was often reason enough for him to attend a gathering. He would show up at meetings in the middle of the working day to persuade state and county bureaucrats that roads needed to be improved, bridges built, etc. He made it to every Chamber of Commerce lunch that I ever attended. I can't recall him ever missing an official function during the 1980s. When I first joined the city council, there were glasses of water for council members. It wasn't long before I requested that we also be given coffee, because Bill often kept us meeting till 1 in the morning. Every issue was fully aired. Everyone had their chance to say whatever they wanted to say. The business of the city was always well tended. And on that note, I wish to give our next speaker an opportunity to take the floor before I turn this into another 1 a.m. meeting.
Very good, Brian. Thanks a lot. Appreciate your comments. Dear Mayor Nee, it's a pleasure to recognize your 21 years of faithful service as the mayor of the city of Fridley. I am sorry that I'm not able to be present to personally congratulate you on your fine accomplishments. Your commitment and pride in the city of Fridley is clearly demonstrated from your long-standing record of service. Under your leadership, the city of Fridley has benefited from your many significant and lasting civic contributions. I join your family, friends, and colleagues in heartily congratulating you. It is an honor for me to pay tribute to your dedicated public service and rich legacy as mayor. Sincerely, Paul David Wellstone, United States Senator. Our next speaker, we had contemplated was going to talk about working with Bill through the 1990s. However, he's been a council person in Fridley since 1977. So I'm not sure how he's going to be able to speak, but at this time we're going to call forward for his reminiscences about working with Bill, Denny Schneider.
Good evening. Short fellow here. Good evening. Thank you, Larry. Thank you, distinguished guests. And most of all, thank you, Mayor Nee, for your many, many years of inspirational and visionary leadership of our community. When I was asked to speak, I said I'd do it gladly. Then they told me that I had 5 minutes to talk. So I sat pondering for the last several days, how could I possibly, in 5 minutes, talk about Bill Nee, a man who I've known since the early 70s, who's had a profound influence on me personally, and who has led this city in an exemplary manner through 3 decades of challenge and change. So first I thought I might try to talk about what Fridley would have been like had Bill Nee never been mayor. Well, just think you're picking up next week's Fridley Focus. You're reading about the latest squabble between city council members, or the latest fight between the city and the county, or one of the many school districts. Yeah, without Bill's unique consensus-building skills, his ability to diffuse issues, his community-oriented viewpoint, that very well might be the kinds of headlines you'd be reading. Or you might read about the latest rezoning request for that large industrial parcel of land up north that we now know as Springbrook. Certainly that land would not have been preserved as it is today had it not been for Bill's leadership and vision. Or you might be reading about Fridley finally beginning to televise city council meetings on its cable system. As Councilman Hammernick noted, Bill's great vision and concern for open government made Fridley a leader in establishing cable TV and in televising meetings to its public. Well, I could go on that way, but then I thought, no, this really doesn't give me the opportunity to capture the spirit of all the good that Mayor Nee has done. So instead I thought, well, maybe what I'll do is I'll sit and talk about all the accomplishments over the last 25 or 30 years. Let's see, there's the senior mid-rise and family housing right across from City Hall. Probably no one in this room even thinks about that anymore, but that was a pretty controversial issue back a number of years ago when that was put in. It took great vision and leadership to realize that that was something this community needed. And then more than that, great communication skills in order to sell that to the community so that that went in without a ruckus and with a lot of public support. Our crime prevention program was one of the first in the nation and was a model for numerous other communities. Once again, that happened because of Bill's vision and leadership. I could talk about our water system. In the early years, building it just to keep pace with the community's growth, and in more recent years, improving it with new wells, interconnecting with New Brighton, automating the system. Or I could talk about our unique street improvement plan, where we figured out a way to recondition or replace streets as they wear out without imposing excessive burden on our residents. Or our park system. Once again, Bill's ability to take a community-oriented, long-range view and to work with diverse interests made community park happen, prevented that from becoming more commercial or industrial land. Now, with Bill's continued emphasis on keeping parks, keeping Fridley a good place to live, We've dedicated over $1 million for park improvements to keep our parks viable, safe, and accessible. Or I could talk about our neighborhood livability programs, one of the programs of the 90s, and another of Bill's visions. Bill always talks about a sense of community, and that's what that's all about, making Fridley folks feel that Fridley's a good place to live, a good place to work, a place they want to be. Shortly after his election as mayor in the 70s, as Virginia mentioned, Bill reestablished the HRA. Since then, he's been a leader in promoting many of the sometimes controversial programs that are all aimed at keeping neighborhoods friendly and comfortable and safe. These include code enforcement, cleanup days, local street improvements, low-cost rehab loans, scattered site acquisition, and on and on and on. Look around and note some of the struggles that you read about in some of our neighboring communities, struggles that we've somehow managed to avoid. Ask yourself why. The answer is pretty easy. They didn't have Bill Nee. We did. Well, it's obvious that if I continued down this track, I too could be here until 1 in the morning talking about the accomplishments. Just think about what the town is like today compared to what it was 25 or 30 years ago. So I finally concluded that I'd talk about how Bill and Kay and the Nees have touched my life, and he has in many, many ways. It was after I attended my first political caucus in '74 that I met Bill. I quickly became involved in his campaign for mayor. It was during this campaign that I first got to really know Bill and Kay and the rest of his family. What impressed me most was Bill's genuineness, his love of the democratic process, his love of our city. Bill never ran for mayor as a stepping stone to another office or to seek personal power. His values, his vision, his genuine desire to make things better, his view of the democratic process, keeping it open, listening to all sides of an issue, making sure it worked. All of these materially shaped my views on life as well as my political life. During that campaign, we put together slideshows and took them around the city, talking about the issues. We must have been in 60 or 70 living rooms at coffee parties. Bill attended every one of these shows, talking one-on-one with people. Bill finding out their concerns and their desires, and people having a chance to spend quality time with Bill, more time than would be possible through the traditional door knock of most campaigns. But this goes back to Bill's basic belief that people ought to have an opportunity to question their government, their elected representatives. This is another value that I learned from Mayor Nee. A couple of years later, when I sought election to the city council, I remember spending countless nights sitting at Bill's kitchen table with that awful mud-thick coffee that Bill likes to drink, working on campaign literature. We discussed all sorts of issues, agreed on some, disagreed on others. But during this, Bill taught me another very important lesson: how to listen to people and how to respect opinions that are widely divergent from my own. In short, how to make the consensus-building process of democracy work. I learned from Bill a unique sense of idealism tempered by reality. This is how I'll always remember you, your leadership style, Bill. You held out for the ideals, but you also recognized what it took to make things happen. So you can see, when I agreed to speak, I accepted an impossible task. You can't talk about a multifaceted, highly talented, creative, visionary statesman like Bill Nee in 5 minutes. I can say that as you look around the city of Fridley, Bill's mark is everywhere. Our city is such a better place to live because of Bill Nee. I'm happy Bill has touched and influenced my life. Bill, I'll miss you profoundly on the city council. I wish you and your family the best of everything in your retirement and look forward to a continued friendship with you.
Much more, Bill, than just working with you on the city council. The obvious friendships and relationships that you've developed are outstanding and something that all of us carry with us forever. And you know, your dedication to that leads me to the next letter that I've received. To the Honorable Mayor of Fridley. Congratulations on your retirement as mayor of the city of Fridley. America's tradition of hard work has made our country strong, and you can be proud of your contribution to that legacy. Your dedication to the public is an inspiration to others. On behalf of all of those of us who have benefited from your service, I thank you for a job well done. Hillary and I wish you good health and every future success. Bill Clinton, President of the United States. It almost makes me choke up, I'm telling you. It's so outstanding.
That table must have worked out.
I don't know who worked, but it's terrific. The relationships that Bill has established, as we all know, in the busy world that we're involved in particular in the political world, a lot of times the human relationships that kind of get shunted and pushed aside. One of the programs that you've heard mentioned here previously by some of the speakers is the human relationship, the city-to-city relationship that Bill was a prime developer in between the city of Fridley and our sister city in Formy, France. This relationship has now existed for approximately 18 years. We have here with us tonight Marceau Bateau, who was the Secretary General of Formy, France for a great number of years until he retired. He's now Vice President of Formy Fridley Sister City Organization. He too has been active in economic development, and for many of you who do not know, Formy is approximately 70 miles northeast from Paris, out towards the Belgian border. Our next speaker has come all the way from Formy to be present at this event tonight. Please welcome, if you would, Marceau Bateau.
Don't worry about my accent. Mr. Ricky, maybe. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friend, dear Mr. Mayor, may I say, dear Bill, first of all, let me thank you very much for being so kind in inviting me to take part in this official ceremony. It's for me a great honor and a marvelous opportunity to get acquainted with so many important people, and also and above all, to meet again with all the good friends I have in this city. I can tell you, it has been many years since I first met a gentleman who would become one of my closest friends, despite the distance that keeps us apart. May I remind you that I was introduced through the Medtronic board, who were at this time just achieving an industrial extension program in Formy. I would like to thank them again today. So the contact was established, and I was very happy that my dream to develop relations with America came true. And I met you, Bill, an early morning of August 1978 at the City Hall. How could I draw the portrait of a man who embodies so many outstanding qualities? The character I first happened to get acquainted with struck me as someone so human and easygoing. No doubt, he had inherited that good nature from his forebears. He has also cultivated an inborn charisma that had enabled him to bring people together. As he took part in World War II, he knows how horrible war is. As he fought in the US Army to enable French people to recover their liberty, he knows the price of freedom and peace. I am sure nobody in the Formy Fridley Association could ever forget that genial smile and that cheerful tone in his voice. Indeed, all the ingredients were here to complete the making of a paragon of friendship. My dear Bill, never will I forget the different landmarks that went into the fulfillment of our 60 program. We have shared the first infancy. Together, we have striven for tangible exchanges. I may say you have been the keystone of our success on both sides of the Atlantic. Bill, I am very honored and very proud to have you and your family as my best and warmest friend. This speech would not be complete without adding some word expressly to Kay, who was so patient and who deserves our warmest congratulations. I wish you both more happy moments to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marcel. And by the way, if anybody's wondering what the CIH behind his name in the program means, I wanted to point out to you that Marcel is also a Knight of the Legion of Honor, one of the highest awards that can be granted in France. So congratulations on that also, Marcel. Our next speaker is a longtime friend of the Nee family, going back many, many years. He's been an elected official here in the state of Minnesota, first serving at Congress back in, I think it was 1948. I know Bill first became involved in Senator McCarthy's first campaign for the Senate in 1958. Worked very hard in helping getting him to be elected. In 1968, everybody remembers the presidential election and race that year and the controversy. And Bill and Kay marched with Eugene McCarthy from New Hampshire to Chicago in his quest for the election and the nomination of his party. Somebody told me that for whatever reason, they came to be known as the Ma and Pa Kettle of the McCarthy campaign, whatever that story is, and I'm sure it's long. But that was the magical mystery tour, and I don't know how many of you remember, but of course, the college campuses, we talked about being clean for Gene, and everybody was cutting their hair. And Bill tells me he was doing the opposite. He was leaving his hair grow so as to be more attractive to some of the college campus kids that were around in those days. So it's unusual how that goes. But in any event, by the way, I should also tell you, I'm sure you've noticed that there is a number of TV cameras and other things that are present here this evening. And all of you should look and smile at the cameras. Mike Hazard, who's in charge of that program, has been following Senator McCarthy around the country in preparation of a documentary. And they are, of course, here tonight to record his participation in Bill Nee's Evening of Appreciation. At this time, I'd like to introduce to you and call forward Senator Eugene McCarthy.
Well, I've asked him to check the microphone because one of the promises we made back in '68 with some suggestions from Bill that if I were elected, we'd have public address systems that worked everywhere in America. We might not go to the moon, but we thought democracy would be better served by good public address than moonshots. And it's one of those unfulfilled promises, Bill. We may have to run once more on the public address system issue. I think I should tell you I'm somewhat apologetic that Bill was involved in most of my campaigns, and I haven't distracted him from his local duties. Think of what he might have done if he hadn't been distracted, but 2 or 3 times. There's that local government and also what we used to call sub-local government, which is where the real decisions are made. And he served on all of these commissions and city government and was involved in my campaign. He had a kind of double function. One was he was called public address, but public information man and the public relations person, but most of the people involved in my campaign, some of them volunteers that we had, it was hard to deal with volunteers, we found. You didn't have too many of them. Bill was our professional, kind of bridging the gap between the amateurs and the people who thought they were real professionals. And we had 2 functions really that we were most important. We had a man named J. Herman Schauinger from St. Thomas, and we designated him as the ultimate no man in the campaign. The only function he had was if Bill sends someone to you, or I do, especially Bill, you can consider what he has to say, but be sure to say no. If you ever say yes, you're gone. I mean, this will be your last act in our campaign, and so Bill has the first judgment as to whether we'd say yes or no, but when he decided on no, well, I often went to Herman, and he gave the right judgments, or it may have passed through Kay on the way. I didn't remember the Ma and Pa Kettle, but some of the kind of high-level public relations people were always upset because we say, well, do what Nee tells you to do, or what Kay Nee tells you to do, and this was kind of tough for people like Garth and some of the volunteer public relations people we've had. They say, what kind of a campaign is that? Who are these Nees? So we built them up as the ultimate experts. It was sort of mystical, say Nee, and they began to kind of tremble at the name. And beyond Nee stood J. Herman Schauinger. The first campaign Bill and Kay were involved in, he was in 1958 when I ran for the Senate, and we had a different concept, really. It wasn't the kind of public relations now which you say, let's get somebody elected and then see what the issues are. It was rather, what do we do with the issues? And the candidate became kind of secondary. And Bill was pretty realistic. I was thinking of him the other day when I read Bill Clinton's rather long speech after he'd won the election, in which he pointed out that there was kind of a physical, natural demonstration of support for him. But when he was born, it thundered and lightning. And I said, when did anything like that happen to me in my campaigns? And Bill was with me in New Hampshire. The closest thing I have to anything like that, the earth didn't open. And someone in the press said, do you feel a groundswell? This was in February. And we said, no, it felt more like a frost heave. The only time the earth responded to me was a frost heave in New Hampshire. And Bill and I understood it. Most of the kind of press people, especially from the South, didn't quite know what manifestation this was or what significant it meant. But we followed this through from the very beginning. When 58 I ran against Ed Thigh, and it was considered a pretty serious test. Someone said, well, you can't beat a Scandinavian in Minnesota. And I said, well, we're not running against a Scandinavian, we're running against a Norwegian. And that made a difference. And the only poll I think we ran was we sent Bill Carlson up to Lindstrom or some of those places. And see how we were doing, and he came back, and we were very much reassured because Carlson talked to some Swede, I think it was Lindstrom, and I said to him, what do you think of Ed Thigh? And the Swede said, well, he's nothing extra. So we didn't need any more polls. We just went on in that campaign, and actually it got to be kind of a farm program. Bill was then some kind of agent for the Farmers Union publication. And, he put together, I think, the 3 or 4 best statements on agriculture that were spoken in that whole campaign of 1958, and we went on to victory. We did exploit Ezra Taft Benson a little bit. You may not remember. He was the agricultural secretary under agriculture, and I remember one of my first speeches. Some people were upset. I think Bill endorsed it. He would take blame for some things I did, but Ezra was for 80% of parity, and then 80% of 80%, and we worked it down to where it would never be, a farm program would never disappear, but when you got to 80% of 80% of 80%, went to about the 10th level, it got down pretty low. We'd worked that out, and we said that we were hesitant to criticize Ezra. He was a Mormon, and he said that when he was asked to be Secretary of Agriculture, why he hesitated. There was a prophecy in the Mormon Church that someone would have a high position in government. But he was so modest, he said, that he didn't think it could be Ezra Taft Benson. And he was praying and meditating and waiting for the word. And finally it came to him in the parking lot outside the church, Mormon Office Church in Salt Lake City. So this was his endorsement. We were, hesitant again, and especially we said we hesitated to criticize him because Moses had to go at least halfway up the mountain to get the word, but in Ezra's case, it came all the way down to the parking lot. We sort of developed that issue, Bill, as you know, and ran that campaign, and it worked out all right. And then we had the 64 campaign, which he was especially helpful because I was running against the mayor of Wayzata. Bill knew how mayors operated, and it was very good. And it was Wheelock Whitney the Third. And we always worried about these guys called the Third. We pretended we couldn't read those Roman numerals, you know. We referred to him as 111. Finally, he was kind of charging. We hadn't brought enough industry to Minnesota. Bill was there, knew about that. I think we did it. We said we did. We went out to take a look at Wayzata to see about productive enterprise in Wayzata and around Lake Minnetonka. And we reported that we found shocking underemployment. Most people didn't work more than 2 days a week. Some of them hadn't worked for 3 generations. It was a pretty awful scene. We said, you ought to go out and look at it. It's desolate. And I think we proposed 2 projects. One was to put a fishery on Orono Bay. And we observed there was a lot of good native hardwood that we might establish a sawmill. People could make quilts and sell them on Route 18. We'd rehabilitate. Well, that worked too. So Bill was very useful on these sort of incidental issues, and gave good advice from the very beginning. And why is that?
He'll go to work for you like he went to work for the Twins.
Oh, he was going to bring baseball.
Baseball, yeah.
That's right. He had big billboards. Wheelock will go to bat for you. We actually said that when he ran for office, he dropped the third. He just ran as Wheelock Whitney. And I think we said that, or I don't know, it was Bill's suggestion that I say that my grandfather's name was Mike McCarthy, and my father's name was, as they called me Mike McCarthy, I would be running as Mike McCarthy III. But I didn't think you should repudiate either your father or grandfather. Just to run for the United States Senate, you have to have some real family values. So it worked out pretty well for us until we began to run for the presidency. It was almost too much. I tell people you can't really stop a war all alone. It's pretty hard when you get into that. But we gave it a good try, and a couple of other minor campaigns after that, I always counted on Bill and Kay to show up and give us support. And I wrote the ultimate testimony in '65 after the tornado. You know, if you're in the Senate, you have to go out and look at the ruins and act as though if you'd been there, you'd have held up your hand and the wind would have stopped and turned back to wherever it had come from. That's the good when you have a flood. It's still there, you know, and the farmer says, there goes one of my cows. You say, oh, it's too bad. Cow, you can't turn it back the way we could. But I went to Fridley, but before that we went to Minnetonka because those tornadoes were indiscriminate. I mean, they struck every place. And we were going around, and the house was completely gone. And there was an older relative, a young man, 40 or so, he was kind of poking around. I said, was this your house? And he said, yes, he said. And then he began to smile. He said, well, not really. He said, I lived in it, but it belonged to my mother-in-law. And there was a wonderful relief on his face. I think it was Mrs. Crosby, his mother-in-law. Well, we went to Fridley, and the ultimate testament, the house was gone too, but on the front lawn was a McCarthy for Senate sign that had been left over from 1964. And whether it survived on the lawn all that time or whether they found it in the ruins and put it up, I don't know, but it was, I thought, a testimony to Bill. So in any case, that's part of the record, and I said I was going to apologize if we drew him away from some of the problems he faced here in Fridley, but what you reported on him, he didn't miss very much. And one or two things that I kind of liked as you reported them, that he charged the cable companies for coming in, and it was a good thing to do. My position had been, over the years, almost every time a new administration comes in, somebody discovers that people who are renting land for grazing cattle in the West are not paying enough. They say, you know, that's sagebrush and that buffalo grass, and they ought to pay more, and they show you a cow. And I've been saying, well, it's not so bad. What we really ought to do is make the television people pay for the right to graze on the public mind. So Bill was ahead of his time here and saying, if you're going to graze on my people's minds, you're going to pay for it. And we're going to have you do it. And I thought we might organize and sort of have consumers now say to CBS, look, you pay us. You ought to pay us to listen to Dan Rather. I mean, and since you sell us anyway, and here you have the example of it here, one of the first in the country, I think, one of few really, where this kind of fundamental point or issue and principle was honored. So Bill, I can't really thank you for all you did, but I have a kind of campaign against undeserved thanks. But I commend you, which is a much higher sort of recommendation to commend him for, because he always did what he should have done. And if he'd done more than that, which would have been too much to expect, you might thank him. But I'm here with all of these people, your friends and fellow workers, to commend you. And actually, I go beyond that. I do thank you for what you did in my campaign and for what I knew you were doing here and what I had reviewed for me here tonight.
Let me tell you, our next person that we're going to call up here is, of course, Kay Bonner Nee. I don't know if this is true either, Senator McCarthy, but I've been told, and I guess maybe I'm stealing this from somebody, has characterized Kay as probably one of the few people in the world who Senator McCarthy might listen to once in a while. And I don't know if she deserves that credit or whatever, but in any event, we're going to call up Kay Bonner Nee to introduce the family and give you a few words on the family's behalf.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Larry. I thought that maybe some of you might like to know how Bill and I ever met. Which was way back. I graduated from college one day, and I went to work at KATE radio station in Albert Lee the next day. And there, working as an electrician, was a young man named Bill Nee. I thought he was crazy. I'm not sure that I've ever come to the conclusion that he wasn't. But anyway, when I first started, I was officially the women's program director for KATE, but I wanted to do more things than that. So I decided to do every week a half-hour show in which I took a stage play and made it into a radio play, right? The first one I did was one called Lifeboat. Some of you in this room may remember that Tallulah Bankhead starred in that way back then. And it took place with lots of water going on. And so they said to me, oh, we will get this young man who's working here to stir the water in this big pail that they had while we're doing the show, right? That was Bill Nee. Let me tell you, before we had finished the play, I was covered with water from my legs up to my hips because he had been so enthusiastic about turning it. I said, I don't want him to ever work again on any of this. You understand? No more ever this man named Bill Nee. Okay. But he was on duty when we were doing a mystery show. And in this mystery show, there was the sound of a key turning in the lock, and the door opening, the door closing, and then the key turning again. Then a little bit later, the key would turn again and the door would open, right? And they said, hey, look, he's on duty. There can't be too much wrong that he can do, right? He's the one we could do. So I said, all right, I'll take the chance. Okay. So we get to this momentous part where the key is supposed to turn in the lock, the door opens, and then the key turns again and the door closes. Okay, that all happened. But then the time came when the key was supposed to turn again and the door was supposed to open, and all we heard was and he couldn't get the door open. I said, I don't want anything to do with this guy ever again. He's ruined the whole thing. And I said, oh, but he tries. Okay, so he tries. This was also a young man who rode a motorcycle way back then, right? And I was coming home one day. I lived with 3 roommates, and we were supposed to take turns shopping and doing the cooking and so forth, and it was my turn. And I'm with a great big bag of groceries, and I'm walking down the street, and this guy comes up, Bill Nee, with a motorcycle, and he has a sidecar, and he says, "Oh, come on, let me give you a ride home with your groceries." And I'm saying, no, I'm just fine, I'll be all right. But he insists, and I finally get into his sidecar. So I get in, he starts with a big jerk, and all of the groceries go over my head into the street. And I'm saying, get away, I don't want anything more to do with you, okay? Finally, this isn't finally, but working up to this, he says, "Let me come up to your apartment, I'll bring you a book." And I said, "Well, all of my roommates have got to be home, or I'm not going to see you with any book, okay?" So he comes up, and he brings the book, and he sits at my feet, and he reads to me from the poems of A.E. Housman. And my roommates are really bug-eyed. Like, what is with this guy? This is really kind of way out stuff. Okay, then finally one day, he persuades me I should go on a canoeing trip with him. Okay, it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I feel, what can happen? I can go on a canoeing trip at 5 o'clock in the afternoon and I'll be safe. So we go out, and it's all right. I know how to swim and all of this stuff in case we turned over. We get back, and I realize we haven't had anything to eat. He must be starved, and so am I. So I did invite him back up to our apartment. And I made him a fried egg sandwich. I wasn't much of a cook, Not that I've advanced very much since then, but I handed him the fried egg sandwich, and he took a bite, and he said to me, "Bonner, this is the worst fried egg sandwich I have ever had in my entire life. Will you marry me?" And by the time I got through laughing about that, I told him exactly what he could do with what was left of that fried egg sandwich. Then I went on to Chicago, and he volunteered, because he was a motorcyclist, made sense, right, for the motorcycle corps for the U.S. Army. They turned him down because he had flat feet. So he waited to be drafted, and where did they put him with his flat feet? In the infantry. That makes good sense, right? So anyway, I went overseas as an entertainer with Special Services. He with the Army, and at some point, we found out later that we had been in the same town at the same time, but didn't know, that the two of us were there. But he did write me every day the whole time that he was in the Army, and sometimes it was on questionable paper when he didn't have any real paper. And we finally, see what happened to Bill, he was put in the United States in what was called the ASTP, the Army Special Training Corps. which was for all the young men who tested, 150 or more IQ. And they were going to save these young men and send them to advanced training in college, so on and so on and so on. But what happened, of course, was when the Battle of the Bulge came, or as we called it over there, the breakthrough, they needed every possible human being they could get their hands on. So they sent all of these young men who had had no training, they had not gone through anything over there. They put them right in the middle of where all the awful things were going on. As a consequence, a great many of them, were just slaughtered like hogs. No training, no anything else, and that was the end. I have always wondered when these brilliant young men are going to rise from their graves and accuse us. But that's beside the point. He managed to survive. And aside from a head full of shrapnel and a lost eye, he came through. So, as a matter of fact, enough so, because he was picked up by a field hospital, luckily enough. Enough so that at the end of the war, he played the French horn in the GI Symphony. So what do you know? And then he came back to the United States, and I came back to the United States, and we met each other again, and well, eventually we married, and I must say that the great thing that we've done, there are our children. Are in order of arrival. There is Christopher Bonner with his lovely wife Suzanne, and Nicole Aaron with her husband Alan Cox, and Lisa Nee with this wonderful man with the camera in his hands, and
Rachel.
Your name is Jeff Cohen, right? Okay, I got that right. And then Rachel Francesca with her husband Adam. And we are absolutely delighted to have them all here tonight. And I can't tell you how wonderful it is to see all of you great people. When I look out, hi, it's so good to see you. Hi, Carol. All of you wonderful people who showed up. It's very thrilling. Bill and I are more than pleased and grateful. We're what can I say? It's a marvelous thing to have. It's a great evening. And I hope that in a little bit, maybe you can enjoy it as much as we do. I thank you so much. Miriam George, hi. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Here comes Scott Lund and Barbara Warren.
Yeah, you got enough.
Very good.
That was tough.
Yeah.
That was tough.
This is a short one too here. Honorable Mayor Nee, the members of the Appreciation Dinner Committee gave serious consideration to the appropriate gift for you today.
It's been kind of a long ceremony this evening, so without further ado, therefore, on behalf of the Fridley community, your family, friends, and associates, it is our privilege to present to you this certificate marked paid in full as a gift to you for the wheelchair you have chosen. Thank you for your service.
It's hard to figure out how to start on this, but it's a great gratification to me and Kay to have this presence here. We really appreciate it. I think especially we appreciate Pat Gable because she's the dynamite woman. I don't know what we can do with her. Well, she's always been like that for us. I don't know if, are the kids going to say anything? Were they planning to? Oh, okay. You know, when this first came up, I looked back in my files of names. I'm surprised how many people are on my list and presently in my computer. Anyway, I started to reflect on not only the campaigns that we won, but what you never hear about is the ones we lost, which were substantial. Anyway, I started to reflect on the key people in this over my lifetime in politics. And it appeared to me that there are probably at least 3,000 people who had key positions over the years that when I look at the list, I look back, somebody like Jenny Locker and her husband Jim, who while I was out of town, they got me elected mayor the first time, which is rather convenient. Anyway, all these things that flow through your mind. Many of the key people are gone on to bigger and better things, or at least maybe bigger things. Anyway, I thought that there was really no way to say thanks to all these people other than just to know them. I think it's necessary to say that of the work that we've done in public life could not be done under any circumstances without Kay. She was by all means the person that is a great asset in the way of public life. I remember all these things. I remember Les Carolyn's husband, preacher at the St. Philip's. Yeah. Down in the basement, Les undertook teaching our children how to silkscreen signs, lawn signs, and then they made silkscreen sweaters. It says 3 cheers for Bill Nee. And Les was in there spreading ink, and the kids were all making these signs. It says 3 cheers for Bill Nee, didn't it? You were good kids. As long as they were home or within reach, they participated in every campaign I ever was involved in and made things happen. So I appreciate that. And it's hard to explain all the elements of the campaigns you win and the campaigns you lose. But most especially, it has to be okay that made it happen. And the sacrifice she made was that she was involved in mayor stuff instead of the career that she deserved and still pursues. So she's been a marvelous help to me, and I'm sorry that it took so much of her time. Anyway, I don't know what else might be appropriate. I'm really glad to see you all, and thank you for coming.